Right, welcome back to the channel. I am the Average Golfer. In today's video we're going to answer the questions to the debate: what is the difference between a super game improvement iron and what I would call a traditional blade like iron? Exactly the same loft, so how does one perform different than the other? Right, now before we actually go into hitting any golf balls, the first thing that is going to make your decision as to which way you go is how you like the look or dislike these two irons, because obviously they're hugely different. And one of them indicates towards a super game improvement iron. It's a visual that suggests, well, you need a bit of help. And the other one suggests you're a better player. But I think sometimes there's a crossover in our brains that confuse us and make choosing the club based on the way they look a real error, and one that could be costing us significantly. So what I want to do is, I'm not going to talk about looks anymore in this video. I will perhaps talk about turf interaction, because that's something I do think is hugely important with the width of these soles. But other than that, looks are going out the window. This is a purely data-led experiment, and what is actually the difference between these two in terms of performance. Right, so I'm going to kick things off with the halo. The one thing I will note is that aside from the visuals, I can feel kind of weight in the end of the club. I am using a fairly light graphite shaft, but the sort of swing weight feels very odd, more like swinging a hybrid, I would say, as if I've got a little bit of bulk on the end of the club, which is a confidence booster, to be honest with you. That's a really good solid knock. 110 ball speed is a really good start. Now things like sound and feel, again, all parts of the equation when you're choosing an iron, but have zero to do with actual performance. So we'll keep it, like I said, stripped right back down. So in that first set of numbers, a 160 carry with a 7 iron, that's a really good number for me. Clubhead speed 80 mile an hour and ball speed all are going to be relative throughout this test, and we'll try and keep them as stable and consistent as we can. That spin rate is low. It's the kind of number, again, that you might get concerned with by using a super game improvement iron, but it's launching a ball super high, big peak height, and again that land angle is coming back down very, very steeply at 47 degrees. Nothing very unusual there, but what I want to do is hit a few more shots and see where we end up with 5 or 6 shots, collecting some data. How does this 7 iron perform overall in terms of consistency? That's the last ball with the 7 iron, and by far the longest, but we're still working with what is a relatively low clubhead speed of just 78 mile an hour. Ball speed's really impressive on that one in particular at 109. That spin rate is always going to be something of concern with this type of club in hand, but overall a 157 carry, and I'll look at the average as a bit later on. So straight away, the next thing I'm going to do is a comparison with the equivalent lofted standard type iron. Now my own PXG irons, that happens to be a 6 iron. Right, let's get that switched out into the 6 iron equivalent, but exactly the same loft. This is again an argument that goes on continually online when you do all these videos, is the sort of the number and the strength of loft are often considerably different between sets. That's not the case here. We've got identical lofts, different shafts. I think I should point out in case anyone sort of picks that up. Well, it was a really solid strike, and ball speed incredibly quick, but yeah, I was going to say felt a little bit down the left. Interesting enough, we've also added quite a bit of clubhead speed there, so that is very much an unfair advantage, and we'll make sure that we sort of alleviate that. I'm going to have to slow things down with my own club and make sure we drop into that sub 80 mile an hour or around 80 mile an hour clubhead speed, because like I said, everything is going to be relative. But straight away, a real good set of numbers. Yes, the carry distance is quite a bit further, but that ball speed or clubhead speed was as well. Spin number is still low, and for those of you who watch the channel will know that I'm only ever going to be touching 5,000 revs with a 6 iron in hand is actually a good number for me. But the one thing you notice straight away is the launch angle is a lot lower. The peak height is probably gotten up there, not too dissimilar, and the land angle is just lessened a little bit at 45.2. But the big noticeable difference straight away for me there is not necessarily the carry distance, it's more to do with the launch angle. So we've got exactly the same lofted iron, but the launch angle is considerably different. So why is that? Why has it happened? And why is it an important factor when you're considering what irons you buy? And that is the last ball hit with the PXG equivalent 6 iron. Immediate thoughts, it seemed to carry just that little bit further on average, but I also noticed the club head speed had crept up a little, and certainly on one, which I'll remove from the end findings, so we've got a sort of fair comparison in terms of that club head speed. Also interested to take a closer look at what happens with spin, with that launch angle, peak height and land angle. They're all key important factors. But there's probably one other element that has surprised me a little between the two clubs when trying them side by side, and something that I think would apply to most golfers when choosing between one or the other. Now, before I go and dive into this data, I'd really like to know your mindset as golfers. If the Halo XL comes out on top with considerably better numbers than that of the blade-like club, traditional-like club, would you be tempted to buy them? Or is it a simple case of, no matter what happens in terms of this test, simply because of the looks of this club, you're not prepared to put them in your bag? That's the real dilemma for me, and I'd really like to know your honest opinions in that comment section down below. Well, a solid strike, 107. Yeah, 160 carry. Nice launch angle, all good numbers. I think there's one final thing that I wanted to talk to you about, if I can get out that light, with the Halos. And that's just the width of sole, because the sole is quite interesting in that I don't feel like it's like a hybrid sole, and it's obviously not like well, it's probably more like an iron, just extended width of sole. And I find that a little bit uncomfortable, certainly indoors on this mat. It'd be very interesting to see what it was like playing off the turf outside. But that sort of club head turf interaction, I seem to get everything just a little bit heavy, and I can certainly feel the club head meeting the ground. It's not had a detrimental impact on performance, and in fact, I mean, it could be actually helping. I'm not really sure, but it's something that I can certainly feel, and it does feel a little bit uncomfortable compared to playing an iron, or compared to playing a hybrid as well, which I found a bit surprising. Right, as ever with these experiments, as I like to call them, they're short and sweet. They don't need to be dragged out too long, and as soon as I've hit adequate enough balls that I feel we've got a sort of a happy, consistent measurement, then we're good to go. So straight into the numbers of the Halo, and you can see them, or the averages at least anyway, on the bottom here. Let's call it 155 carry, 79 mile an hour club head speed, 107 ball speed. 4.5 spin, launching at 21.6 on average, peak height 89, landing at 46.1. I think if you gave me those set of numbers, I'd be more than happy with them. It's with a 7 iron or 6 iron, whatever you want to call it, in this case a 29-degree loft. That's the important bit, I suppose. Then I think that, you know, they're doing a good job. It's as simple as that. The numbers that would perhaps concern you, and others would argue, is that low spin number, but for those who've watched the channel for quite some time, know that is exactly what would happen with most irons, at least in my hand. So anything creeping up to sort of 5,000 revs with a 29-degree club would be more than adequate. So fantastic. We'll then switch up. I think the important thing to remember, 78.8 mile an hour club head speed, before I go into the averages of the PXG 7 iron. because the average club head speed was 81. So there's 3 mile an hour club head speed gain there, and not necessarily the gain in terms of carry distance you would quite expect for that extra club head speed. So a low, it's 156.6 carry. We did swing the club faster on average, even though I tried to take a number of swings out where we did get that little bit quicker. 109 ball speed, and you'll see this smash factor 1.35 with my 6 iron, and it was 1.37 with the Halo. So from an efficiency perspective, that's club head speed relative to ball speed or vice versa, then the Halo was a more efficient club. It performed better based on my club head speed. You then move forward into a spin number, which is slightly higher, 4.8. Again, happy with that. We've got one number there that dropped it off considerably, which is just over 4,000 revs. The others were a lot higher, and again, perhaps more suitable for that type of club. Peak height stayed relatively similar, but like I said, we did launch the ball almost 2 degrees lower, which is a considerable change, and that's the thing that I want to talk about in a minute. And that peak height again, 45.1, not as steep of a descent angle with the 6 iron. So again, I'm more than happy with the numbers that were produced with the 6 iron, but they're more relative to the kind of performance that I would want from that club personally. So pushing that to one side and just doing a side-by-side comparison, I think that the Halo launched the ball higher, which is what it's trying to do. It's the kind of, that's where the CG being at the back, the bigger bulk of the club head, is going to help a lot of golfers. So I think the Halo's done exactly what it should do. And I think vice versa, we've seen a traditional club do exactly what it's supposed to do, and that's again flight it just that little bit lower in terms of that launch angle. It doesn't have that CG manipulation to shove at the back end. Spin number is slightly higher. But overall, I think what it just shows is that loft v loft, there's not a lot of difference between clubs. Any that we could put in this test, you would see similar scenarios with same club head speeds, same lofts, are going to produce very, very similar results. The only thing that changes, I call them nuances, but I think they're a bit more than that, and that's this launch angle element, which can be quite significant. People would argue the sweet spot might be bigger on the Halos. I don't know, I don't really buy into that too much, but I think the main issue here is, can you actually bag a game of Halos or that style of club? Can you get over the kind of looks for the traditional look that you've been used to for so many years? I know for me personally, it'd be something that I would really struggle to do. But anyway, like I said, very simple data-led experiment. I hope it helps you understanding the differences between two very different sets of irons visually, but ultimately perform very similar indeed. Right, thanks as ever for watching. I will see you all very soon.